It's really about not necessarily absence of pain, but minimizing stress, looking for humane handling techniques, shortening the period that the animals might have to be handled. Moving the pigs, in most cases, is not in their best interest or the habitat that they're going. So translocation in itself may not be humane. Euthanasia, which by definition is a humane death, so if there's a lethal component involved, it should be the most humane option available.
For the most part, feral hog damage management is the responsibility of the landowner. Wildlife Services and others can help the landowner to reduce the amount of damage, but it takes a very concerted effort to deal with population management. To remove populations as a whole is very expensive and a very large-scale effort. Feral hogs are difficult to control because they've got such a high rate of reproduction that they can breed back quickly after you leave an area. In addition, they're very adaptable. They can change their movement patterns, they can change their behavior in response to control. That makes it that much more difficult to be successful.
Sport hunting removes every year about anywhere between 8 to 50% of a wild pig population. On average, it's about 20% of that population. Population modeling tells us that to keep those animals stable to reducing, we've got to remove between 50 and 70% of that population every year. That's a pretty tall order, and sport hunting just isn't going to do that.
One of the big questions always is, how can I control a wild hog? What's the best deterrent? Well, there are a lot of things you can use in combination. I know of no one thing that's going to work all the time. And even when you take the best of tools and combine them together, I've never seen an area just completely eradicated of hogs. They may move out for a while, but if you don't keep those defenses up, then they're right back.
The bottom line is they're not native game. And there is quite a few hunters that work outside, let's say, traditional boundaries. And they may be quite unethical. There's a considerable amount of restocking. They're basically homegrown wildlife managers of their own kind. They make their own rules, they do their own thing.
We have so many in this part of the world that really cherish these hogs, and they're wanting to have the hogs just simply to hunt. We know for a fact that some of the hogs have been transported in here, turned out. We know for a fact that there's different landowners around who keep them on their place. And they have a high security, maybe one strand barbed wire fence held up by hedge bushes to contain the hog.
Many of our problems with pigs, the relocations and the new population initiated by people that want to have paid hunting operations in pens, and the fences eventually always break down, the pigs always seem to get out, and individuals that either trap or catch with dogs, pigs, and relocate them to new areas so they have more hunting opportunities. And that side of the sport hunting population is not very well thought of by the other part of the hunting population. So the base population, the core support for resource conservation, the average hunter is not part of that problem. I love pigs. I love the Eurasian, the European wild boar. I think it's a magnificent animal. But it's magnificent only in the context of the ecosystem where it evolved. So if you really want to do pigs, you want to do boar hunting, go to Europe and go boar hunting in its native habitat and really understand the animal. Not this displaced exotic that's been hybridized out with livestock. At the risk of sounding facetious or sarcastic, to make feral swine a game animal is the equivalent of, let's put horses out there and propagate them, or cattle or anything else. It just doesn't compute if you really understand wildlife.
Wild pigs are smart, and many of them have been trapped at on many occasions, so we've educated wild pigs to a great degree. Some of the most common mistakes landowners make in trapping hogs is their expectations are too high initially. One of the things that I preach to landowners is that trapping is a process, it's not an event. And by that I mean there's a process you go by and follow pretty closely if you want to be successful at trying to abate wild pig damage on your property. Trail cameras are the greatest tool that we have in the war against wild pigs. The initial aspect of the use of a remote camera is to get a definitive handle on the number of pigs that are causing the damage. Once you've done that, you can erect a trap of the appropriate size that will handle that entire sounder. Be greedy. You want to capture as many as you possibly can.
2, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Either leave the gate off the trap or wire the gate wide open and continue monitoring as you pre-bait outside and inside the trap. And only after the remote camera indicates that those pigs are routinely entering that trap and using that bait inside the trap, are you ready to start setting that trap to trigger. Once you go through that process, which may be a week from the time you initially record your first images, it may be several weeks before those hogs are reliably entering that trap. But once they are, you're ready to trap and you're virtually guaranteed that you will be successful. Probably one of the most common mistakes landowners make during the pre-baiting phase is there's a tendency to want to set the pre-bait or the trap right where the damage is occurring. Backtrack those wild pigs. Find out where they're staying during the daytime hours. Typically going to be heavy cover near water in many cases. And then particularly if you're using a scented bait, set that bait or that trap upwind of that site so the prevailing wind will carry the scent of that bait down to where those hogs are staying during daytime hours. Selection of baits for trapping is highly regional. Shelled corn is probably the gold standard bait that many landowners start with, but in some cases we try to appeal to the sense of smell, acute sense of smell that wild pigs possess, and use some soured baits or some baits that have scent appeal. And that really has a twofold purpose, I think. Not only may it possibly appeal more to hogs in certain circumstances, but it may dissuade non-target species from using that bait as heavily. And that's just as important. If you're having to continually keep rebaiting because of raccoons or crows or blackbirds also using that bait, then it may be that by going with a scented bait, it may not have any more appeal to the hogs, but it may cut down on non-target species use. If you are going to have a trap that's got corners in it, regardless of the trap size, wild pigs use corners of traps just like you and I use a stepladder. And the first thing they'll do is pile up in that corner, climb over each other, and the hogs on top will go out over the trap, probably never to enter a trap again in their lifetime.
We can look somebody in the face and say, we have trapped at least 800 hogs within 2 or 3 miles of right here by the way a crow flies, and you see the damage. It's just almost a major full-time job. We'll go check the traps every morning, rebait them, reset them. It's real frustrating. So many people in the community, if they found your trap, they would either trip it so it wouldn't catch nothing, or if it had hogs in it, they'd turn it out.
It's an ethical responsibility. We don't need to be trapping and re-releasing wild pigs under any circumstances. It needs to be a one-way trip to hog heaven anytime we can get our hands on them in a trap.
The word just isn't getting out. We need to increase that public awareness, public education. There are some states, especially in the southern tier states, that are doing that. But as these populations have moved into the northern tier states, we need to start doing that up there, bringing people on board, understanding what's going on, understanding what the problems are, and understanding what we have to do.
Feral hog management with the tools available right now is limited to reducing damage to acceptable levels. To do any level of population management, we're going to need research in additional tools like reproductive control, new toxicants, and ecological data to help understand the relationship with feral hog management and other species.
Managers need to understand that they can turn loose millions of dollars and they can implement all kinds of rules and regulations, but there will always be a fringe element that's going to walk outside all of that. And it only takes a pickup truckload of pigs to totally undo multi-million-dollar accomplishments.
When you look at the total damage that they do in our wild environment, I think any person who is a true outdoorsman, a great conservationist, and really looks to the future of what's best for wildlife in our state and for our forest, will certainly recognize that probably #1 enemy is the wild hog.